Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our Everyone Can Contribute Cafe or Coffee. It's the 8th iteration or the 8th version right now, and today we hopefully get a deep dive and lots of amazing things about Keptn. And I'm very happy to welcome Christian and Alois today. And I think probably best would be to start with a short introduction round. Just like I'm now saying, welcoming Alois. Maybe introduce yourself, what you're doing, what you're working, what's your profession, and then like hand over to the next one.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having us today. My name is Alois. I work for Dynatrace, where I'm leading the innovation lab, and I'm also responsible for our open source engagement and our research activities. So these days, I'm mostly working everything related to open source, CNCF related. Used to also drive a lot of our W3C activities and open telemetry work. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm working on most of the time, and also working with great people like Christian here, who we collaborate on building innovative solutions, and who we also made an open source contributor along the journey.
Yeah, so
that was my.
So may I introduce myself? My name is Christian Heckelman. I'm working as a DevOps engineer at ERT, so E-Research Technology in the Estenfeld near to Würzburg. There, I'm mainly responsible for Gitlab Ci CD, our Kubernetes environment, and as Alois already mentioned, I'm working closely with the Keptn team and contributing to Keptn as well. Yeah, so should I choose the next one or?
Yeah, please.
Okay, Niklas.
Yeah, I'm Niklas Mietz. I'm currently working as a DevOps engineer at Verity. I'm currently doing also Kubernetes, and I'm doing blockchain on Kubernetes. So all the hot buzzwords mostly around. Yeah, this is literally my job description mostly. Doing all the stuff, checking that everything our application is currently running, doing Prometheus for monitoring, CI/CD for GitLab, yeah, and so on. And I also contribute a lot to open source, to GitLab, and to a lot of other projects, mostly in the cloud native ecosystem. So I would choose Steve, probably.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'm a backend engineer at GitLab. I work on GitLab Runner. I've been a maintainer of that project for around 2 years now, and that takes up most of my time. I'll choose Mikhail. Is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah.
Okay, so hi, my name is Michael. Michael is correct. So my name is Mike Hagner. I'm a product manager and software engineer at the company called ZKW, placed in Lower Austria. I mainly build high-performance computing software, mostly built with C++, like CAD engine, ray tracing, and so on. And yeah, this is most of my work. I do it for now 14 years now. And yeah, always build tooling and automation around GitLab. So maybe the next one, Simon.
Yeah, my name is Simon. I also work at ERT, a colleague of Christian, leading there the IT operations department. So
actually, he's my boss, but he never told it.
No, I'm not your boss. Yeah, and as I said, I'm responsible there for all IT operations stuff, and mainly sitting all day in meetings. Okay, who's next? Adobakar.
Thank you. I'm Abubakar Siddiq Ango, based in The Hague, Netherlands. I'm a developer evangelism program manager at GitLab, teammate of Michael. Aside from helping my teammates work better. I also focus on evangelizing cloud native ecosystem, things around Kubernetes and other things. When not working, I fly airplanes virtually though. That's all from me, Michael.
Yeah, I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab. I think it's 9 months now, 8.5 months. So time is running fast. I'm the crazy guy who had the idea of doing coffee chats about technology. And I'm hoping to learn from you today. I think Alejandro is missing. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm a technology account manager at GitLab. I actually support Christian, who's my boss. I'm here as a cheerleader too for Christian. Excited to learn from all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say the stage is yours. I know that you have prepared demos and slides. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm more or less I'm here to warm up the audience for Christian here, so I'll keep it obviously brief. So in German, we would say I'm the Vorgruppe. He will do a live demo. I was just doing the most crazy thing, like for KubeCon, I was doing 6 live demos in a row in a single presentation, so I decided to go only for slides this time. Also, PowerPoint can be very challenging too. But yeah, my goal is to keep this really short. And just give you some background on what we're actually doing here with Keptn. First of all, Keptn is now a CNCF project. It was originally started at Dynatrace. It was a re-implementation of some of the automation we had internally here. And when we rolled it out to customers, we saw that a lot of them want to reuse it and extend it. People like Christian, and that's why we decided to make it open source. Obviously, we wanted to give up some of the control of the project and give people more security. That's why we contributed it to the CNCF. So we started the contribution process quite a while ago. That's back when it was still sandbox. And now we'll eventually then go to incubation going forward. Also, you can find all the details here. And if you wonder what the logo actually means, it's obviously the Kubernetes shape, and this is the captain's. These are the captain stripes of the British Royal Navy. So that's how the logo came along, if you wonder. It's not a fish without the back, some people may think. So just very briefly, the idea behind Keptn is it supports progressive delivery and operations workflow as a control plane. So what you see here on top is already, and I'm just accelerating this here. When you push in a pull request, you have especially multi-stage delivery that you want to trigger, and obviously decide based on service level objectives whether you want to deploy to a stage or you do not want to deploy to a stage. And again, do the same thing here for production. And the idea is you can plug in any tool that you want. Obviously, as we're coming from Dynatrace, Dynatrace is one choice, but you can do pretty much the same with Prometheus as well. So it's totally tool agnostic what you can do there. The key design goal was we just didn't want to cover the delivery side of the house. We also wanted to keep the ops automation side of the house. So when something happens later on, when your application is in production, it should be running fine. You still want to take care of things like, yeah. So we wanted to cover the whole thing. That's where we come to the closed loop remediation piece. Why does it call it closed loop remediation? Because very often when you see, especially demos at conferences about remediation, you see the tool, like the alerting tool, may be Prometheus or whatever you're using, and it's sending off an alert to a system, and then it's more or less done, and it triggers some workflow, but it rarely goes back, validates whether that action actually helped, and then triggers the next action. And that's really what closed loop remediation stands for, to dynamically pick actions that should be used for remediation purposes, from simple things like cleaning up disks, disabling feature flags, checking whether they actually work, and in case they do not work, then taking other actions, or then eventually escalating it to a human user. Oops. So that's really what we have here in Keptn. It is a control plane, so it's not like replacing the tools that you have already. Think of it as a control plane the same way you would think of a control plane in the networking space. So a networking control plane does not replace your active networking components, but it is used to orchestrate all of those components that you already have in place. So supporting you on defining that you want to have blue-green deployments, quality gates, operations automation. Everything is based on cloud events. So that was one of the design goals behind it. When you look today at a lot of tools, they use proprietary APIs, because historically there wasn't any work that says, well, let's standardize what a deployment event actually looks like. That's where we started to create some events, what they can look like, and are currently working as part of the Continuous Delivery Foundation interoperability group to standardize on these events, what they can look like. And as mentioned, obviously you can integrate any services that you want. And as Christian will later on show, this is absolutely true for GitLab, that you can simply plug in there. So control plane. So why do we actually need a control plane? Don't we have all the tools that we have? Technically, we have it, but most of what we have today are hard dependencies on the scripts and the automation that we have, where we call, say, in individual steps into our configuration management, into our deployment pieces. Then we configure monitoring, then we configure testing. Then we might throw in some chat ops and some rollback activities. And we kind of like add these scripts that get more and more complicated. And the idea behind a control plane was, let's keep the scripts because they are great, but let's not hard code them together. Oops. Let's add some space in here and add eventing in there. So in short, the idea is if we deliver microservice applications, don't do this using a monolithic approach, but also do this using an event-based microservice approach. So we introduced the standardized events in here. This is an example, like a deployment event. We want this artifact to be deployed to a certain stage, and the strategy should be blue-green. And based on these events, we can have a process definition, and then we just subscribe the tools and the processes we want to do there. And this is where it falls into that control plane idea. And again, the concept is really copied over from what we do on a networking control plane. We have the application plane on top. That would be our process, what we want the process to look like. Then we have the control plane that does the actual event orchestration. And then we have, in our case, the execution plane, not the data plane, that then orchestrates the proper services to move services from the left, so from more or less your repository all the way to production. So you see there are a lot of overlaps on how you route stuff in a network and how the components work in SDNs to how you do continuous delivery, and we copied a lot of these concepts over. Then obviously we have the developer who moves their artifact through the way. And the idea is you can plug in any tool. I already talked about standardized events. So there is a spec repository as part of the Keptn project that defines these cloud events that the tool should understand. The idea is that this only specified what has to be done, but not how this has to be done. In this case, a new Docker image should be deployed to a certain stage, but you don't know whether this triggers a GitLab pipeline, this triggers maybe an Argo rollout process, or it does a pure Helm deploy. This is totally separated away from the process definition, from the event type per se. So what you define, what you see here on the left is what's called a shipyard file in Keptn. The shipyard file defines only the order of events, how they should occur, or how a certain piece should flow through the delivery stages. In this case, it defines the stages, a deployment strategy, and a test strategy, and also an approval strategy. So in this case, we see that in dev, we deploy directly, only do functional tests. We approve things into staging automatically if quality gates validate fine, manually otherwise, always in the blue-green fashion. Then we do performance testing, and then we move further on there. What you can clearly see here, there is no definition on how this is actually done. And that's exactly the separation of the what we want to do from the how we want to do it. So the shipyard only defines what should be done, but not the how. You then have the Keptn services that are installed as right now Kubernetes services, where a concept that we call the uniform. So the Keptn's then wearing a uniform where they define which services should take care of certain tasks. Again, think of it like an event-based microservice approach of building automation in here. What you see here is what that control plane looks like. So we have exactly this definition that you saw before. It will automatically create a multi-stage environment, link all the tools together, and allow you to fully automatically ship code and orchestrate the tools underneath. What it has built in, and that's where it's kind of opinionated, it always has quality control built in. So the lower part down here that you see, that's what we call the quality gates. So we use your SLI and SLO definition that as monitoring as code you would ship, also for validating whether we promote something to the next stage or even keep it in the current stage. So in case we realize that your quality gates are not working and for the current stage, we A, would not promote it, and B, we obviously would roll it back in the existing stage as well. And on the right-hand side, you basically see the same from an operations perspective. When a problem or an alert is raised, we will automatically pick the proper remediation actions, check whether they are working or not working, and then execute this process. So how do we know what's working? So the idea is we get a problem or an alert into Keptn. And then as part of your application, you ship what's called a remediation file. Think of this just operations as code. So usually what people would do, they would write wiki pages on what should be done if something goes wrong. In this case, it's a YAML-based description. Here we have like a more business-focused version, like when we see that the new release, for example, drops on from the conversion rate, then scale it up, disable a feature flag, and do it. And scale it. This again is managed along the Git process. So if something happens, Keptn will automatically fetch this remediation file from a Git repository. In this case, it does a scale up, and then reevaluate whether the metrics are back to normal. If they're back to normal, everything is fine. The process gets closed, or otherwise it gets escalated to a human user. Obviously, you can have multiple of these operation steps happening as well. The idea is instead of like defining one end-to-end operations process, every service ships with its own operations instructions, and they are triggered on demand when problems occur for the specific services without having you to rather define a lengthy operations process in here. So this was the like very, very short version of what Keptn is and what it does, because I think it becomes way more hands-on when Christian shows it live with an actual example. When he unmutes his mic.
Here's unmute. Zoom. I'm used to Google Meet, so unfortunately. So you can see my screen? Okay, thank you. So what I prepared is a little demo. Not all use cases of Keptn are covered here, but the basic ones. So in the end, what we are doing today is we're building an image with an application. Oh, I'm too fast. I'm sorry. Go back one. Oh, doesn't matter. So we're building an image with an application. We are running the GitLab standard tooling over it. Then we are doing something what is called Keptn onboarding. So in our case, we don't want that the developer needs to onboard his service by its own in Keptn. So we automated this step. In this case, the Keptn project and Keptn service will be automatically created in Keptn. It will upload all the necessary resources into Keptn, like the SLI and SLO definitions, also JMeter tests, and so on and so on. Then we will deploy our application into a monitored environment. In our case, as we are a customer from Dynatrace, into a Dynatrace monitored environment, and send after the deployment finished event. So that what Alois already told, that Keptn is event-based. So we telling Keptn, hey, we have just finished the deployment of our application. What Keptn is now doing, it's triggering other services like Alois described with a controlled services. In this case, it will create automatically an SLA check using Dynatrace synthetic service. In Dynatrace, it will execute JMeter tests. And after all the stuff has been done, we will go further and execute a quality stage, such SLA, SLO evaluation of our service. We will start the evaluation. We will poll Keptn if the evaluation is done. Oh, I'm sorry, too fast. Keptn will then retrieve the SLIs from our monitoring tool, Dynatrace in this case, but as Arlo said, Prometheus is also working out of the box with Keptn. Then we will poll for a Keptn evaluation done event. And as soon as the done event was returned from the Keptn API, we get the score of our deployment. In this case, everything is fine. And if everything is fine, we can go over and deploy our service automatically in the next stage in production. And if the SLO evaluation will fail, our complete pipeline will stop, and we prevent then to that bad code is promoted to a higher environment automatically. So for the demo project, what I've prepared, I've installed Keptn on a single machine. So you can deploy Keptn to a Kubernetes cluster, to full blown, right? But if you just need to use a quality gate, you can install Keptn on a EC2 instance with keys on it, for instance. As part of the keys installation, there will be some services already being deployed, the Keptn uniform, like the generic execution service and the JMeter service. Then I've installed the GitLab and Dynatrace synthetic service. These are two services which actually was contributed by myself to the Keptn, to the Keptn project. Then we have a small Go application, just a simple web service, which is returning a website. And we are deploying via Helm to the same Kubernetes cluster or keys cluster. For this demo, if you deploy completely in Kubernetes, you can entirely use Keptn for your continuous delivery. If you are deploying to other services, like you deploy Lambda function, you're deploying to an IaaS or whatever, then the Keptn continuous delivery feature is not able to do this. So we are doing this within our pipeline still. But enough said, let's go to our demo project. So everything is on gitlab.com. For the German guys, they will recognize the face of the Keptn Iglo. So here's my project. As I said, very, very simple. It's only the one little service, right, which are using actually the feature flags. This is something I will cover later on, perhaps in our discussion. And I have here my Helm chart within my project, and I have here my Keptn resources. But let's take a look into the interesting part, the Gitlab Ci Yaml. So first of all, what we need to set up here to get this up and running is we need to define some CI/CD variables. So in our company, I've defined the Keptn API token, Keptn bridge URL, and the Keptn API endpoint as a group level CI variable, which can then be used by all other projects underneath, right? Which is very convenient. The Dynatrace API tenant ID and problems auto detect feature is a different thing, but it's also included. Then we define variables like our project name and our service name. Sure, you can also use the predefined GitLab CI/CD variables like CI project name for this naming here. It's just for demonstration purposes. Then I have created myself a little Docker container where I've installed the Keptn CLI, kubectl, and Helm 3, also on GitLab. But I think I don't say anything new to you guys, right? So after we are including our Keptn templates, so I will quickly jump into the repository. So all you need to run this demo or to get started with Keptn in your environment is here inside the repository. Feel free to include it directly or edit the resources or contribute to the templates if you want. I think there are much smarter people here on the call than I am. So as I said, feel free to contribute here in this repository if you have other templates to add to the Keptn repository here. So as said, we include our Keptn stages for onboarding, for the deployment finished event, and for the quality gates. Then we defined, of course, our stages, building our image. So, and after the build, of course, the GitLab test stage will be executed. And when all tests are done, we will run our Keptn onboarding. And the Keptn onboarding is in the end a normal job, right? So what we are doing here within the job is we are authenticating our Keptn CLI against our Keptn installation. We ask Keptn, hey, do you already have my project onboarded? If not, then it will create the project for you with a Shipyard YAML. I will go into details with the Shipyard later and the Keptn resources. Then we are checking if the project, if the service is already onboarded. So we are asking Keptn, get service of my project. If the service is not already there, it creates service. Then every time we are onboarding or running the stage, we are updating our SLI and SLO definition. So you can have in Keptn, normally you have a kind of upstream repository, but we would like, or in our company, the developers like to have one single repository with all resources in it. And so we maintain our Shipyard or our JMeter tests within the same repository as the source code and do not utilize the Git upstream feature of Keptn. But normally you can say, hey, Keptn, I have here an upstream repository where Keptn will onboard all the files. And if you make changes to the, let's say, to the Helm chart or to the different checks to the JMeter test or so, you can check it indirectly in the upstream repository and Keptn will utilize it from there. So completely GitOps approach, right? So we are updating here our SLI and SLO resources with the Keptn resource command in our project, in our service, in the stage. You can see it here. So we say here, our resource is a SLO file and we will upload it to SLO in our Keptn upstream repository or Keptn repository. The same for the JMeter tests. So we are uploading them to the subfolder JMeter for my Gitlab Conf YAML. I will cover later, and the same. I was experimenting with a Litmus chaos operator, but didn't finish it before this demo started. So this is just forget about this one. Okay, go back to our deployment. So as I said, so now we have created our project and service in Keptn. Let's take a look at the resources we just added. So we have here our Shipyard YAML, in this case, a very simple one. We have two stages, staging and production. So nothing fancy, nothing more. Then we have our SLI and SLO definition. And in the SLI definition, I'm telling what kind of indicators I want to retrieve from Dynatrace in my quality gate evaluation, like throughput, error rate, response times. That's the default one from Keptn, but you can also add something like database calls and so on. So there's much more you can add here. Then I have my SLO definition where we are tying everything together. So here, for example, I say, okay, my quality gate will succeed if my response time is faster than 10 milliseconds and 1 if it's slower than 10 but faster than 20, and it will fail if it's over 20 milliseconds. The same for error rate, response time, P50, and so on, and the throughput. And my quality gate should pass if it's an overall weight or an overall score of 90%. Okay, back to the next resources. So we have here our JMeter tests. There's a basic check and load check. In this example, it's only querying the website once. It's nothing fancy here. And then I have my GitLab configuration. This is for an example later on, where we have a GitLab service. When a deployment was made in my service, it will trigger a GitLab pipeline within another repository. This service is still under development, and it would be cool if somebody will contribute with the service or with this in this project, adding some features like getting the logs from the entire pipeline to return this stuff to Keptn. Okay, so, and last but not least, let's take a look in the bridge. Give me a second. So we have here our Keptn bridge. So we can see here I have already onboarded my demo project. I have my environment screen where I can see, okay, on staging, I have this artifact already deployed. On production, it's this version or artifact deployed. I have my service overview with all the events I already sent into Keptn. So we see I have a service created. And for the rest, I will show you in a second when we are going to the deployment finished event, when we're sending it after our deployment. So now we have onboarded our project, uploaded our resources to Keptn, and now it's time for deploy our actual application. So as you can see here, it's just a basic Helm upgrade command. I said nothing fancy here. But this is the interesting part. As a developer, he only needs to extend or add these extend to the to a stage. So Keptn will automatically send, or this script will automatically build and send the deployment finished event to the Keptn API. Let's take a look in the deployment finished YAML. So you can see here we are just checking if there is an CI environment or URL already defined, then it will use this one. Else it will just fall back to the URI public variable. It will build the deployment finished event with some labels in it, like my build number, run by, so I know who executed the pipeline. I give some information for my synthetic service, how often the check frequency should be configured, and a CI backlink. And all we are doing here is we are posting to the Keptn event endpoint this payload, and all the rest will be automatically executed by the Keptn control plane. What it looks like, let's quickly go here. So you can see here, or did I already trigger the pipeline? No. So I will start triggering a pipeline run. Run pipeline. And this I wanted to do at the beginning of the demo, but hey, I forgot everything. So what will Keptn do as soon as you are sending the deployment finished event? The Dynatrace service will add metadata information of our deployment to my Dynatrace monitored service. This will look like this. Let's jump into Dynatrace. I have here my demo service, demo project, service name in my environment. And you can see here, it added automatically events to my monitoring. So I have here a deployment event within the last 2 hours, Keptn demo. And I have all the information in my monitoring system, like from which pipeline this deployment was executed. I have the name who executed the pipeline, and all the information you need. Also a backlink to the Keptn's bridge to jump into the deployment finished event directly. So this is really a cool feature. The next thing, and the good thing about it is as soon as Dynatrace is detecting a problem with your deployment, it will also get these information and perhaps can say, okay, your application is performing poor because you have deployed a new version. And then the operator just needs to look into and say, okay, it was deployed by Christian Heckelman, and ask me what I have done there, right? So next, what will be executed, as I said, I have installed the Dynatrace synthetic service. It will automatically create a synthetic check for me in my monitoring environment for my deployed application. So I have here my synthetic test, basic HTTP check, but think about it, you can also write in service for other services, other synthetic services like ping them on or whatever. It's not a big deal. So writing a Keptn service, it's if I can do it, other people can do it as well, because I'm not a programmer actually. So now we have our deployment information in Dynatrace. We have created a synthetic test in Dynatrace, and only with a send deployment finished event. And also, as demo purposes, I have executed my Keptn GitLab service. And this was actually triggering here in another repository, a simple pipeline with only one job. Here you can see my message from my Keptn project. So this would be a good, like in our company, we are executing some tests with other frameworks, which are actually triggered in a GitLab pipeline. And so I can say, okay, trigger the stuff as soon as a deployment is made on my service, and the developer don't need to configure any upstream or downstream pipelines by his own in the CI YAML. So that's quite also a nice feature. And in the end, it will execute the Jamita test and already start an evaluation of my SLI and SLOs I've already done. So the next step would be the quality gate. So in the quality gate, as you can see here, it's just a little job I've defined. I have my variable with my environment called staging. Also, again, an extend here. And the quality gate, it's also just a little bash script. So what we are doing here is we are asking the Keptn API for the last deployment event in my project from my environment within my service, right? So then I'm getting the context ID of the deployment event, and with the context ID, I can query the Keptn API for the evaluation done event. And as soon as the evaluation done event is popping up, I can grab the result from the evaluation done event and ask or take a look into it and can say, okay, if the result is fail, it will fail my entire evaluation. And if not, it's all good and go on to the next stage. Let's take a look into our CI/CD here. To our pipeline. Okay, this one is still running, but let's go to the other one I've executed an hour ago. So quality gate staging. The nice feature, or a nice one, is that you're getting a direct link into the bridge. So you can click into it, or as a developer, if the job is failing, he will get an email from GitLab, right? So and he will have this link within this email, so he can directly click onto it and can see, okay, my evaluation was failed because of, I don't know, the response time is suddenly totally slow. And you can see here, everything was green, and you're good to go for the next stage. Okay, questions, if somebody has one.
Yeah, I have a question. What would be the effort, for example, to exchange now JMeter, for example, like with a different tool for doing my performance testing? So, for example, to use K6 or something like, because we are reading a resource, right?
So actually, and Alois, correct me if I'm wrong, right now it's Neotus, Blazemeter, and JMeter out of the box supported.
Selenium, I think Selenium was committed today to Sandbox, but the effort is you would just have to register a different service. So we would just have to, if you don't want to have JMeter running at all, you would have to just simply uninstall JMeter for the project and just install another service that obviously understands the tests that you want to use. And that's all you have to do. It's right now, this is the bits and pieces that's still a bit rough around the edges. So the plan is to have this totally declarative in a uniform file. Right now, it would be like one kube control apply for the whatever service you want to use. And then the next test run would automatically pick up, hey, there is a new test triggered event, and then the new service would pick it up. But if you have the service already written, you just exchange one service for another one. Another nice use case that was actually shown in the last app delivery use case, CNCF app delivery use case, what they were doing together with the Litmus chaos test people, they were using an existing, even an existing Shipyard file. The only thing that they did in the test stage, they just added in a chaos test. And this was just registering a chaos testing service. And by then chaos tests were executed against the service automatically. So it's more or less currently it's like one line of a kube control command going forward. It's just one line in a YAML file that you have to change.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, so basically that's it for this demo. But I have an other quite cool use case if you want to extend it a little bit. So as I mentioned before, we have also this generic executor service in the Keptn uniform, which is in service was written by Andreas Grabner from Dynatrace. And there you just need to add something. So this service can execute on different events, either HTTP request, post, get, whatever, or execute a shell script. So if you can execute a shell script or execute a web request, you're completely flexible, right? So in this case, I have little funny use case. So I want to get informed as soon as a new deployment was made to my staging environment over a Telegram message. So what I need to configure is a deployment HTTP deployment finished HTTP file with the post parameter, my JSON, and all I need to do now, because I don't want to give you my actual bot ID here, so don't wonder, because I will now add the resource or this file to my generic executor folder with a deployment finished event naming convention. So deployment.finish.http. So the executor knows he should run HTTP request here. So we're adding the resources, has been uploaded. And when I now go to my pipeline, and hopefully it's working because demos, right? You can see here, it's still running the quality gate for production, but let's say deploy staging, retry. Let's wait a second. And as you can see here, I said, add the resource to my project demo, service Keptn demo, only in the staging. So it will be executed only in the staging stage. And here it is. So new deployment on project demo, Keptn demo in staging. So this is a simple way to call other services or to execute scripts without writing an entire Keptn service if you don't need to. So that's basically all from the demo I got here. Let's go to the last slide deck. Here are all the resources like the demo project, the templates, the container, Keptn website, Keptn on keys, the repository I told you before. This is a really good kickstart if you want to start using Keptn. The GitLab service, where I already said I'm happy if there are some contributors who can extend the service with me together. Keptn on Slack, and there are also a YouTube channel for Keptn available, and a perf clinic from Andy Grabner, who is explaining here the quality gates into details. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, use my professional Twitter handle @Wurstsalat. That's from my side. Do you have any further questions or?
So I have a question. So thanks for the thorough demo. I'm pretty much overwhelmed right now. I don't know what to ask in a technical way. I was wondering if I want to start like contributing to the project, what would be the best way? Is like you mentioned some demo environments and some projects to contribute already, but maybe you have some like quick insights where someone could have a look at.
So what I personally do. So first of all, if you want to contribute to the Keptn project, go to github.com/Keptn/Keptn, and there are in the issues all issues labeled with good first issues when you want to start to contribute to Keptn. If you want to play around, what I'm doing all the time is when I'm playing around with Keptn and want to create a little demo environment for my own, Keptn is also being able to be executed on a kind. So, you know, these Kubernetes and Docker. So, do I have already, give me a second, kubectx. Kind.
Yeah, maybe while you're typing, I think the easiest way and where we see most contributions right now are like providing services like Christian did on the GitLab service. There are certain capabilities on in the Keptn core pieces, like the event execution layer and so forth, that is obviously something where help is welcome, but that might not be the easiest start to get started. But what we mostly see people contributing right now, I just mentioned the Selenium service, as it is a control plane, and we want to standardize on these type of events and integrate as many tools as possible. And I want, like we have, for example, integration directly into Slack, where all those messages are integrated into Slack. I mentioned Litmus cows. The easiest way is really via the Keptn contrib services that are just different services that you want to link to. That's where we see most of the contributions happening right now. People saying, okay, I need to integrate this with this tool, another tool. Just today we had, well, I mentioned Selenium. Another one that just made it in there is, for example, integration into Splunk. So whatever tools people are using. And you also see from a Dynatrace perspective, this is like really run as an open source project. So we have also people using it with non-Dynatrace environments at all. So that's also totally fine. Here is like the Ansible service that would execute an Ansible tower integration, and the Alexa service, for example, calls directly to Alexa. I think that the easiest way to contribute is, okay, I want to link this to whatever I want it to do. That's the most straightforward one. Obviously, we welcome core contributors to some of the core components, but the learning curve might be a bit steeper, and the more natural way is always via, okay, I want to integrate this tool over there, or I don't like the way you're doing the issue creation, for example. So like one integration, I think that we don't have right now for GitLab, but for other tooling is if a deployment fails to automatically create an issue for the respective developers automatically. So it's mostly, as the control plane is thin by itself, it's really bound around the ecosystem services.
And if you want to start writing your own Keptn, there is a Keptn service template available, the Keptn service template Go. There's everything described. So this would be the, there's also a YouTube video on how to start writing a Keptn service available on the Keptn channel, where is everything explained. It's really straightforward and not so heavy. So as I said, I'm not a developer, and if I can write in Keptn service, everybody can write in Keptn service. In the end, you have your event handler where you put all the stuff together. To start with Keptn, as mentioned, I can highly recommend the Keptn control plane on keys. So there isn't here Keptn with Dynatrace. Check out Keptn Dynatrace in 5 minutes. There are webinars you can watch and then follow the guidelines. There's also for Keptn the tutorials.keptn.sh site available, where we have full tours like here Keptn installation on keys, or Keptn full tour on Prometheus. So there are a lot of information available, guides available, YouTube videos, and so on. So starting with Keptn is quite simple. So if you need to jump into it or want to jump into it, and as I said, even on a local kind cluster, you can run Keptn. So Keptn, so you only need to run a Keptn install, and it will start deploying Keptn on your local machine. And so you can play around or test your services if you want to start writing your own service in Keptn. The Slack channel is also highly recommended because there are really all the Keptn contributors inside. And if you have any questions, they are happy to help. Did I forget something, Alois?
No, I think that was pretty much covering everything we can do here.
Okay.
I'm betting that Niklas is already hacking.
No, I'm not hacking. I'm currently thinking about something. What is currently the way how the events will be propagated? So in terms of the cloud events, so what is the event broker mostly?
The event broker, so the architecture is that obviously the events propagation itself is a microservice. Right now, internally, it's using nets for event propagation. And when you have a new service, you just more or less define as part of the service descriptor which services you want to subscribe to. That's always the interesting thing with event subscriptions, because you want to do it declaratively outside of the service, but you still have to do the service, the event subscription. That's always a bit of a kind of challenging bits and piece. That's one way you can subscribe to the event. And we also have what we call like outside. So when we talk about Keptn, we talk about the control plane. That's really the orchestration piece, and the execution plane. That's the bits and pieces that execute the actual services. Like GitLab in this case would be an execution plane that would consume services. And you can also directly ask via the API for specific events that you want to execute against. And then it would also go there. Then it would not go via nuts, but then it would jump directly. You would query more or less the storage layer directly and execute an event as well. But internally, it's nuts based. But you can also ask for specific events that you want to react to if you wanted to.
Yeah. So probably I can't switch from nuts, for example, to Kafka or something else. Is it also possible?
Yes, you can, because even that part, like the whole, not with the standard installation would install nets.
Yeah.
But the eventing service itself is also a service that you can switch out. Because we use it, for example, for different, that's something we also internally use when we have deployments, which we're also running on Kafka. Right now, it would be a bit, maybe a bit rough around the edges, but the plan is you can switch out that underlying layer entirely. So what we would then have is the Shipyard controller component more or less being left in there, and the execution services, and you can also link in other services if as needed.
Cool. That's great. Because my question comes from that.
No,
because my first point with cloud events coming from the Knative project, and they are saw first time the cloud events mostly. And they have also a component that's called Knative eventing, and this is also mostly an abstraction about which event system you can use underneath which event flows do you want to have in the event system mostly. That's why I'm asking.
Interestingly, we had the previous version running on Knative. But one of the challenges why we use nuts and also even smaller compressed components is because you want to deploy especially the core management components directly on top of your application. And many of the serverless frameworks come in pretty heavy when it comes to resource footprint. So if you would have to deploy that serverless framework on top of everything, so we wanted to keep it super small. That's why we had just the interfaces in there and just threw in nuts from the beginning, because, well, I remember the very early days when we were running on Knative, people were saying we can't even use a free GKE cluster to just run a demo on my very small application because the whole infrastructure is consuming these amounts of resources. So that's why you even could switch out to something smaller than nets if you wanted to run it. So that was the whole architecture goal behind it.
That's true.
Technically, you could also use a GitLab pipeline, by the way, to redistribute the events if you don't want to use another event broker. So that's That's how it's set up with bits and pieces. And that was also the whole idea behind how we built it. Because some people say, this is replacing what I already have. Said, no, that's not the idea. You have like massive investment in what you have already built. But if you want to gradually build on top, you want to do it in an easy way. So this is not replacing a pipeline system you already have. You can see like you can't build a pipeline in the traditional way in Keptn or a control flow in Keptn. That's what it is targeted to do. So you can reuse what you already have and reuse other components. There's, for example, an Argo service in there. If you don't want to use the built-in batteries included deployment service, you just switch to Argo, you switch to GitLab pipelines, and whatever you want. So it's more or less from a Lego perspective, it's the assembling piece, and you can take the bits and pieces that you already have in place. And that then allows you with the event subscriptions to do like super funky things, because you can throw, for example, there was one request we got from one user. What if I throw an iOS application at it? Can you automatically trigger a process that would deploy it to the App Store? Yeah, obviously you can do it. We're not able to do it, but you can have it like flow through this process and have the same orchestration automation that you want, that it's deployed properly if you want to do so, without having to more or less touch everything that you have already available, and can more or less have the same validation workflows that you have in place as well. And it would, for example, also pick another testing service, because you obviously test the application differently. That was probably a pretty long answer to a very simple question, but
yeah, thanks for that.
So what I'm right now thinking about, because we want to use, as you know, GitLab has an unleash for feature toggling underneath, right? And there is already an unleash service in for Keptn available, but it is utilizing the normal unleash API, and GitLab have some own API around it, or API endpoints. So that will be one of my next, I would say, projects I want to do, to extend the unleash service for Keptn to utilize the GitLab feature toggles. So that's one interesting thing I want to look into for the future.
So, has anyone else a question, or should I ask? Because I have also another question in mind.
I have a little question, but this is more a historical one. So you mentioned that the original project was built at Dynatrace, an in-house project. So how long do you build Keptn from day one of you rewriting the core components?
Roughly. So that's a very funny story, because Keptn is actually the project that we never wanted to build. So initially, this was really built on the deployment automation there, which we have internally for our own SaaS environment. So that's obviously we couldn't use for anything else than for Dynatrace itself, because the only thing it could deploy was Dynatrace. Then I think 2.5 years ago, we started to actually build a demo project. So the idea was to just show people how to build automation. So this wasn't supposed to be an open source project to do what it's doing right now. This was like really a training project. That's how that whole thing started. So it was really a demo as part of what we call like our internal university, to teach people how to build continuous progressive delivery and automation. That started 2.5 years ago. And then over the first year, it morphed more and more into, okay, we actually want to deploy something else on top of it. The funny story is, for the first year, the only application you could deploy on Keptn was SockShop, because it was a demo. It was a demo environment. That's what it was really built for, to deploy SockShop. And then a bit more than a year ago, that was like really the first version where you could start really using it for deploying actual applications. So overall, it's like 2.5 years, but you would say like the first 1.5 years, it wasn't really built for deploying actual application, but more as a demo and training and reference application. And that's what you see right now. It's a bit older now than a year, and we're now gradually moving components over.
It's really a funny story.
It is funny because it's the project we never wanted to build. And as we moved in there and we started people using the code we had in the trainings for their production grade application, we say, well, that's not a great idea. How did you get it to working, by the way? And that's how it gradually moved over. That's also when we decided, okay, let's move it out of the control of Dynatrace and move it over to the CNCF.
So is it planned, because it supports Dynatrace, is it planned to replace it inside or partially, or is it already replaced partially?
Yes and no. So there's obviously components that we already have in Dynatrace that run on our own internal services, like the previous version. Think of it like Borg and Kubernetes in the Google sense, more or less. We're not going to replace what we have already rolled out for our existing customer installation, because the benefit would be rather low. We would get exactly the same automation that we have today, just by investing a massive amount of additional menus on top of it. But for all newer components that we're now deploying and new software that we're developing, we are and will be using Keptn as the deployment mechanism then, yeah. But it's always hard to sell a project. Let me invest like all of these resources and put all of this risk on a project, just that at the end, hopefully everything works exactly as before. That's always the hardest sell.
That the words all managers like to hear.
Yeah, that's like you're taking a massive risk here and you're getting zero benefit out of it. But the quality, that's also why we have, but what we have already done, the quality gates component, even for the say more legacy version of what we had before, we replaced the internal the implementation of the quality gates with the Keptn version of the quality gates bits and pieces. But that's also where also the service-based approach comes into play. We just then link it to our existing backends that do things and just link it in for the quality gate evaluation purposes, and the rest stays pretty much the same it was before.
That's a good idea.
That was one of the challenges we had actually, when people said, well, we want to modernize here and we want to change something over there. That is not like this, like you have to change everything they want, because that's not super helpful. But you can gradually take on bits and pieces that you want to use, and also change tools as you like them. That's also what the CNCF, this Raisin CNCF radars has clearly shown, where they said also on observability and also the continuous delivery bits and pieces, people like to experiment way more today. So some of the end users, as the end user service, that they are not changing tools on a yearly basis. This is really hard if you have built something like you want to throw in a new chaos engineering tool, or you want to exchange a testing tool and say, well, I like Jamida, but hey, for 90% of my services, it's way more resource effective, and I'm totally fine putting it in there. And you don't want to touch everything you have built previously, and you even want to do it sometimes even under the hood. Or we have people like switching from internal services to as a service offerings for some of those tools.
Thanks for the answers. Niklas?
I forgot my question. Otherwise, it was probably then not so important.
Sorry, Niklas.
No problem. I think it was not so.
So what I can tell you from our history is we started Keptn using the quality gates, and that's the easiest approach to get started with Keptn. You don't need to necessarily use all the other services from the beginning. Just plug it into your CI, run a quality gate evaluation after your deployment, and having this quick start, I would say, and it's really beneficial because you're getting so many insights out of the box from this quality gates, how your service is performing, and that's something we have experienced, which is really, really beneficial in our deployment process or life cycle. Development life cycle, not deployment.
Yeah, and in this case, you can also install it in a way where you remove all the other components as well. So that was also key for us. If you just want to use one specific use case, you remove all the other components and don't run them at all.
So what we did before we used Keptn was let's say when we want to configure a synthetic check in Dynatrace for our application, we had also GitLab CI templates, which we were using and including, and so on and so on and so on. And these are, like Alo said, the bits and pieces we are replacing with Keptn. So with Keptn synthetic service, we don't need to include any YAMLs. So we just send the deployment finished event, as explained, and Keptn will take care of the rest without any further configuration. And so you can break up these big monolithic pipelines more and more into smaller pipelines, which is also better manageable, right?
Yeah, mostly it will help us as the developers or as the operators when you have something like the whole flow is in one pipeline. It gets really complex and you can't find now where the point, for example, it's in terms of where you can also make at least separation. So for example, that you want also to have an option to do a simple rollback on that case. So then you need to also template more YAML to that and add this and find all the edge cases right now. Or you need to keep have in mind at start directly and can do it in a linear way to see it, okay, this matrix tend to do going this way. So then we do need to probably a rollback and then we can do it in a more measured way or like in a scientific way. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing we didn't mention here, on the backend, we also create traces for all the execution. So more or less every pipeline run, as well as every remediation run, is a trace. So it's more or less this observability built in. You could query, so when we're opening up the interface, you can query them as traces. You could also start to ask interesting questions like, show me whether there were any production level, say, there were any production level issues, performance issues for pipeline runs that had the performance test evaluate to pass. Meaning more or less your performance tests don't reflect the actual situation in production. You can like ask other things in there. Also show me remediation actions that while they were triggered, did not resolve the problem. So the idea of like having traces behind that, you can ask like have like this observability, not just for your code, but also for the automation that you have later on there. And the really funny thing is, and I had this discussion with somebody who comes like from a more traditional old school ITIL approach. I told them, because this is old GitHub space, so everything is versioned and I can query the traces. This is actually more ITIL than the ITIL processes that you have defined. Because everything is more or less available. You have like full auditability of everything you did in the system, because the only way to interact with it is via the API. You can't simply change anything in there in any other way, because the system's not going to allow it. And that's why you have tracing and full version history available.
So that's the nice benefit of events.
Yes, you could relate. And I don't know who said it. Like the nice thing is, if you can automate it, you can audit it, which is kind of true.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's also other funny things that we have seen people doing that just added a stage later on. Say you want to fork for a hotfix, you want to fork from a production state you created, and you let everything being built in the background without you ever touching it and even having access to that environment. And even if you then want to deploy, it inherits all of the restrictions it has for those stages. Because one of the requirements we had also with the amount of stages that we have, that we create them dynamically. Like if you have a new production cluster, like in our case, this might be like 2,500 at the latest stage. This is nothing you put anywhere anymore. So this is like fully programmatically managed. And you want to say, I want exactly this version, but I need it in another environment so I can try something, deploy back into that environment, and now I want to sync it back. Without having to type all that code that would be required, because that's also why the automation into the pipeline tools then makes sense, because those pipelines are highly parameterized, but deciding which parameters to send to the pipelining tool is then taken by Keptn. That's exactly this control plane idea. You're still calling the pipelines that were there before, but you're deciding what the right parameters are for calling these pipelines right now. Like your networking control plane will tell the hardware, okay, this is how it should be routing traffic right now, because that's how I want it to be routed. and having that configuration top down. So that's where we see most of the benefits eventually, that it allows you to write less automation code and being able to more easily orchestrate it.
Yeah, mostly what is a big advantage about that is that you now write your decisions down into a file that is declarative, and that you can also explain and share with your colleagues. For example, when a new persons come into your team, you could explain why you did these decisions on which point, probably because you have it's version controlled right away. So you can also see, okay, for example, we see it on Black Friday, we need to do the following steps, or on our last big deployment when we were making a breaking change, we saw also that we need to do change a little bit our indicators in some parts. And this is a great benefit of that. Instead of, okay, I know the person in my company mostly who doing all the deployments, or now doing a lot of deployments, and they have all the decisions in mind. And when this person goes away, you are probably also have some problems then.
We had two very interesting situations here where this separation of what we have in the shipyard and the uniform was super helpful. Big financial institutions, their biggest problem is that they have to validate that the process that you're following follows company guidelines. And what they had to do before, they had to read pretty much every single automation code all together. Right now, what they do, they can put in the shipyard file. The shipyard file has a code owner's file in there, so nobody can change it. So they have no control over these files. And then they can add in the automation tools that they want to add in there. But you will know that it's always enforced. And for the Black Friday one, was one of the initial examples. You can go into the shipyard file and you say that you're e-commerce companies throughout the year. You can experiment as much as you want. We do canary releases, we do blue-green, that's totally fine. But there are these 4 days of the year where we're making 80+% of our revenue. You're not allowed to touch anything. You're just changing one file in the shipyard, the switch approval always to manual, disable it for 4 days, and then you re-enable it. And all the services that are underneath will be automatically reconfigured for their deployment that they're now running manual. And you're not running into the issue of maybe forgetting one pipeline that now still automatically deploys, because there's always the one that you do not know about. So this is one of the use cases that we have seen. Somebody say, yeah, disable it now. And because we were talking with a lot of the people we work with, say, how are you doing this today? Black Friday is just coming up. How do you disable that people are just randomly deploying into production? We tell them not to. We tell them that they should talk. They say, well, what if there's automated processes that you don't know about? You can't tell an automated process to do something differently. Kind of has a point there. So I think it also helps to your point. It helps from the auditability, but it also helps that you enforce it, because you would get a new project, but the shipyard will already be in there as it's separately managed. You can't access this file. You can just pick and choose the tools. If you're rather hey, over JMeter, that's totally fine. You can do it. And you can change this, but you cannot change the overall control flow for your software releases, because you don't have access right to this file.
So Keptn is perfect to protect Friday afternoon pushes.
Oh, we could argue about whether you want to do Friday afternoon pushes or not, but this is something you could do. You could have a simple action that would just, for example, disable it over the weekend and re-enable it on Monday for all of your pipelines.
Yeah.
But this can also be done directly in GitLab. You can do code freezes for that. So, but you need to interact with your pipeline. So if you're going to the documentation, that would be now the benefit of Keptn. So you need to add an extension to your Gitlab Ci Yaml, so that there's a check for if it's a deployment freeze or not currently happening. And this can be then done by Keptn. You don't need to touch the Gitlab Ci Yaml. Yeah, that would be most of the benefit.
So the benefit is you can have multiple projects, multiple pipelines, yada yada yada.
Yeah, and
also you can also
split the process of having a separated CI part and also having a separated CD part. Probably you could also doing some more advanced stuff that you having a real dedicated part of that the CD part, for example, for staging and production is quite different than, for example, to deploy to the integration environment, because every developer can deploy to the integration environment, changes can happen, but you want to have a separated process for the CD part for staging and production, because there are some more regulations. I couldn't think about this.
And there's, I mean, we haven't seen it right now, but there's like also, you will always see how far your environment is behind, which I also find very nice, because everything is like GitOps based. I would say, okay, like your production environment is 5 service changes behind your staging environment, because we know everything is going in there. Interestingly, by default, it doesn't allow you to deploy something that hasn't passed the quality gate evaluation. So you couldn't even push it further. So you can't be sure if you click on that checkbox to manually promote something, it has been checked whether it could actually promote it or not, where you're not breaking stuff. But you can always break stuff that wasn't checked before, but you couldn't have a faulty release being pushed forward. Which was actually one of the #1 requirement for quite some time, where people said, well, they want to have manual control over the automation again, but they want to have it in a way where they can only do things manually that don't break stuff. Java is kind of like a challenge, so how do you know? But that's why we disabled for, so if you have the quality evaluation, for example, in staging and it fails, it will not show you that, it will still show you that you're behind your staging environment, but it will not allow you to deploy it because this is actually failed. So you're not allowed to push through.
Yeah. Everyone is not quiet. A lot of impressive stuff. And I'm
lot to process.
I'm really curious, and I want to try it out at least in some of our test clusters.
Yeah, how about next week?
Next week is Lissetti is a stopper because it's KubeCon, but I'm open to do it in 2 weeks at least.
Yeah, there's also, by the way, KubeCon talk from the app delivery SIG, where we'll show something entirely different, because they would just take a single Helm chart and build a 3-stage automated deployment pipeline in 5 minutes. So the app delivery talks, for all of you who are interested, what we did, I mean, most of you have seen like this whole discussion about like the CNCF landscape. It's a total nightmare. Everybody in marketing is happy because there's like 3,000 logos on there, but nobody in technology is happy because there's roughly 3,000 logos on there. Some people used other words for it that sounded more like shit show. So what we said, okay, let's take all of this, but let's take the positive side. There's a lot of stuff out there. So we created this small project, which we call Potato Head. And we deployed it in 5 or 6 different ways. We deployed it with a manifest, with Helm, we used CNAP, we used Keptn, we used Argo CD, Argo rollouts, we used Flux. We did not yet use GitLab, by the way, because we didn't have time to build it. But again, it's a CNCF repo, and you can simply commit a delivery mechanism to it. Let me just post this here for people who might be interested.
That would be cool.
So the nice idea, that was the crazy idea where I said, why don't we do... And the app is obviously also going to be extended, because right now it's a single Hello World service, pretty much to that one here. This will then include stateful workloads. It will have multi-stage secret management, because that came up. But the whole idea was, instead of showing people that the landscape is so complicated, it's like, hey, these projects are really useful, and you can very nicely combine these projects together and build stuff that actually is a lot of fun. And there's like from Matt Farina from Helm contributed, Carolyn van Snoek contributed the CNAP example. Also, if you've never seen CNAP thick bundles, there's an example of CNAP thick bundles in there. There's even a Helm operator, an operator SDK Helm operator in there. We're working with the Kudo team to get a Kudo operator in there. So the idea is to like have a multitude of, this is how you could deliver stuff on Kubernetes in a lot of different ways and play around with it. And obviously right now the use case is very simple because it's a simple stateless service, but the goal is to make this significantly more complicated and challenging as time passes. But right now we can't update the repo because KubeCon is next week. We had to record the talk a month ago, and we want people to be able to try exactly what they are going to see in the talk next week, which they couldn't otherwise because the repo has been massively updated.
So you will add a lot of more Toy Story features there. So Jesse will come up, Wheezy will come up.
We are adding, we're doing some, like, the idea was we didn't want to take that usual e-commerce application. We really didn't want to do it. Not yet another e-commerce or travel application. Let's do something funny, microservice-y. And I was actually having Wiener Schnitzel with potato salad. I think, well, Potato Head is like a microservice application. It's the potato head and you can put these things on it. And that's how that idea then eventually came along, because well, you actually can show canary releases by, for example, doing a canary release of a foot service, and the left foot is different from the right foot because you can deliver different types of feet. And as this went on, it became funnier and funnier. But the underlying idea was also, when we looked at Hipster Shop, the challenge was that Hipster Shop is pretty heavy. So if you want to set it up in a multi-stage environment, that was something we were suffering from on the Keptn side as well. It becomes really resource intensive, and it focuses a lot on building microservices in many different languages. But problems like, okay, how do I model service dependencies? How do I upgrade multiple stateful workloads? Are things that are not really handled that well in something like Hipster Shop, because that's not really what they were really focusing on. And that was the idea behind Potato Head, to have something funny, but also tackle some of these like super hard problems. And even the CNAP example is really nice. So how do I deploy something to an air-gapped environment? Okay, it looks like just like a potato head when I deploy it there, but still try to get today a potato head in an air-gapped environment. That's actually pretty challenging as you move there. And it's also easy for people to learn. So that's why we started why we started off with this project, and keep investing in it. And again, then you start with multi-stage secret management for third-party services. And then you start with GitOps for multiple stages. So there's a lot of very interesting examples that can be put in there. And I don't really care how complex the services is. It's just delivering back an error, and those is complex enough for that service.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's funny to use a potato head instead of a e-commerce application that everybody's using.
That's the #1 point.
Yeah. So we are only a little bit over time, only a little bit today. So it's okay. So how do we should continue now? But what is your opinion on that?
Sorry.
Michael, that is currently muted.
Yeah.
Oh.
You mean me, or you mean the other Austrian Michael?
No, but other Austrian Michael wasn't muted at all. So,
so I'm still overwhelmed. I could listen to you all day long, especially on the observability and tracing and CI/CD deployment parts. But I think we should say, hey, we are enjoying our evening soon. Maybe have a chat, or maybe revisit the topic like in 1 month, in 2 months, 3 months time, and have another coffee chat around this, maybe. I would also love to learn more about Dynatrace and what's going on. So if Alois would be up for doing this by yourself, or bringing in more colleagues, I would totally love to learn more about it. But yeah, thanks for the demo. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for your time. And I would say I wish you a pleasant evening.